Chris Luzniak.
And I'm Rob Byer.
And this is the Debate Math Podcast,
the show where we redefine what it means to debate in mathematics and education,
where multiple sides of ideas are explored, evidence matters, and we all grow and learn from hearing each other.
Because the world and our classrooms are not binary.
So let's dig into this month's debate.
Hey listeners, this month's debate is a live debate, a recording from the West Virginia Council of Teachers of Mathematics, or WVCTM, conference that I attended in March of 2026. In this debate, we tackle the question, when students don't have prerequisite skills, do we hit pause and spend days or weeks reviewing those skills? Or do we stay the course and fix gaps in real time? Imagine you're working on solving equations, but integer operations are falling apart. Or you're introducing functions and foundational algebra skills are missing. What do? Do you pause grade level content and give students what they truly need? Or is that widening the opportunity gaps by lowering expectations? If you push forward, are you maintaining high standards or setting students up for confusion and frustration? Well, listen in as two teams of two have a live debate at the WVCTM conference on this resolution. It is better to pause grade level instruction to rebuild prior skills than to push forward and address gaps as they appear. Our statement for debate is, it is better to pause grade level instruction to rebuild prior skills than to push forward and address gaps as they appear. So here, arguing that we should pause grade level instruction to rebuild prior skills. First up, we have a former teacher of 31 years at Philip Barber High School, the same school where she was once a student. She's been an M3T fellow for the past 2 years. We have Sissy Collins. Round of applause for Sissy Collins. And Sissy, can you tell our audience where you are currently and what your current role is and more about yourself?
So last January, I transitioned to Harrison County Schools as their math curriculum specialist. So I've been there for 1 year, and so far it's a very different role, but one that's actually, it's been pretty exciting. So
awesome. And just one follow-up question that I ask all my guests. When has math been controversial to you?
I was like, you prepared us for this, and I tried to think really hard about when it was controversial for me. And like, all I can say is that I don't remember a time that it was. It was just always a place where I felt successful. And so that's what kept me in math, was from an early age, I felt successful and safe in the math class.
And then teaming up with her is a national board certified teacher and a math teacher leader with the Mountaineer Mathematics Master Teachers, M3T. She's also a mom to 2 college students and started teaching as a second career. It's Sarah McGivern. Round of applause for Sarah. And Sarah, tell us more about you and where you currently are.
I'm currently teaching at Washington High School in Charlestown, West Virginia. I teach statistics, calculus, and algebra 2.
And then again, the question we ask all our guests, when did math become controversial to you?
When I took algebra 2 in high school and we started working with radicals and properties of radicals, I did not understand them. I could do them. I could memorize rules, but I didn't know why until somebody taught me about a rational exponent. I am very much team rational exponent.
All right, thank you both. So that is team for pausing instruction to fill in gaps. Round of applause again for them. On the other side, arguing we should not pause grade level instruction to address gaps, we have an educator from Summers County Comprehensive High School who has more plants in her classroom than she has students. It's Ellen Holt. Round of applause for Ellen. And Ellen, tell us where you are, what your current role is, and more about you.
Like I said, I'm at Summers County Comprehensive High School. I teach geometry, algebra 2, pre-cal, and applied stats. I also was supposed to be the coach of the academic showdown team that fell apart, but aside from that, that's pretty much it.
Okay. And the question we ask everyone, when has math been controversial to you?
Well, like Sissy, I was struggling with this question until a little bit ago. I thought, the one time I can think of is during Common Core. I had a lot of pushback from a lot of parents in the community that I knew about the new math and how evil the new math was and those types of things. So.
Thank you. Okay, and then teaming up with her is a math teacher of 11 years who spent the first part of his adult life working in a residential treatment center for troubled youth. He's also a CrossFit coach, enjoys playing golf, and spends his free time with his wife and daughter. It's Jason Massey. Round of applause for Jason. And Jason, tell our audience where you are, what your current role is.
I currently teach at Mountain View School in Monroe County, and I teach 2 sections of Math 8 and a section of Algebra 1. And the fun fact I always give about Monroe County is there are more cows than people in Monroe County.
Getting rural out there. Okay, and again, for you, when has math been controversial to you?
I think math first became controversial to me. Math always came easy to me, and when I started my education, working towards my education degree, I had a math teacher that wanted us to learn a base 5 system, and I could not wrap my head around why on earth we would ever learn that. But eventually, we had a debate, and she swayed me to her side, and now I see the reasons why we do a lot of the different things we do in math.
Debate at work. Thank you. Okay, round of applause for this team as well, Ellen and Jason. All right, let's get into the debate. So we begin with opening statements from each side. So each of our 4 debaters has prepared an opening statement for you. So we have the team first of Sissy and Sarah, who's arguing that we should pause grade level instruction to address or rebuild prior skills. And I think I'm passing it to Sissy first to start us off. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. As math educators, we all share a common goal to ensure every student not only advances through coursework, but truly understands the mathematics that will support their future learning. Our team stands firmly for the position that it is better to pause grade level instruction to rebuild essential prior skills than to continue pushing forward and addressing gaps only as they appear. Together, we have about 5 warrants for this. Warrant 1, this belief is grounded in the simple truth familiar to every teacher in this room. Mathematics is cumulative. Each concept forms the foundation for the next. When those foundations are weak, even the most engaging grade level instruction becomes fragile. Students may appear to keep pace for a while, but misunderstandings compound, confidence declines, and the learning eventually collapses under the weight of unfinished understanding. Warrant 2, we advocate for mastery before momentum. Momentum without mastery is not progress, it's just motion, and motion alone does not lead to long-term achievement. When we pause to rebuild prerequisite skills, we are not slowing students down. We are giving them a footing they need to accelerate later. Additionally, it is our position that addressing gaps as they appear is reactive and not proactive. It depends on catching misunderstandings only after they have already interfered with learning. Catching these gaps at the moment is not efficient, it's disruptive. Teachers must stop mid-lesson, reteach foundational concepts on the fly, and move on knowing students are left behind. Neither option supports sustained learning. So now I'm going to hand this over to my colleague and teammate Sarah, and she's going to cover the remaining warrants under our position.
Our third warrant argues that by rebuilding skills before teaching new material, you are reinforcing prior knowledge. Some students need gaps to be filled, but strengthening foundations is beneficial to all students. The rebuild can be scaffolded to different needs. Activating prior knowledge has also been shown to increase depth of understanding. Warrant number 4 is by rebuilding prior skills, it's going to allow for more organized instruction. It shows directly how the new material relates to prior knowledge, and this can strengthen student understanding. They can fit it into existing schema. And our final warrant is that by starting off rebuilding prior skills, you start off with success for a lot of students. This allows students to build confidence before introducing new material. It also lets teacher identify and pinpoint actual gaps that are not just a need of things to go over. It's the stuff that they've missed that's even further back. In conclusion, that is our position, that we should pause grade level instruction to reinforce prior knowledge.
Awesome. Thank you. Round of applause for their opening statements. On the other side here, we have Ellen and Jason. Ellen has been voluntold to go first, arguing that we should not pause grade level instruction to address gaps. And Ellen, I'll pass the microphone to you.
If a patient comes in with high blood pressure and a broken wrist, does the doctor say we must pause all treatment until the blood pressure is perfect, or do they treat both at the same time? In education, we face a similar question. Should we stop grade level learning until missing skills are fixed, or address gaps while students continue moving forward? We need to continue pushing our students forward while simultaneously filling in gaps in their learning. I have 2 warrants for this. If a student is not exposed to grade level content, they will perpetually be playing catch up. They might catch up on some prior skills, but they will in turn not know the current grade level content. Also, recent research from TNTP, the New Teacher Project, suggests that the brain is flexible enough to allow for quick pivots in instruction between remediation and grade level content. And then when students who have fallen behind are given grade level work, along with stronger instruction and higher expectations, they catch up faster than students who don't receive grade level material. We owe it to our students to both work on missing skills and continue pushing them forward in grade level content. We have a responsibility to not just meet them where they are and keep them there, but to push them forward and make up for lost time.
So when I think about when I want to have just-in-time support, I think about a blog post from Robert Klapinski in 2019 when he talked about the difference between just-in-case supports and just-in-time supports. My warrants come down to when we use just-in-case supports, we often try to fix problems that may not be there, that we think are there, but don't happen to be there. So we're giving kids instruction on things that they may already know, and we've not given them the opportunity to show us if they know those or not. My second warrant is that if we stop instruction to fill in gaps, it can take up large portions of our class time, which put us behind on pacing guides and making sure our students know material that they're going to need to know to take a state test. As much as we hate to think about state testing, we're still judged by what our kids score on a state test, and they need to be ready for that. And another warrant is that through our grade level teaching is often when we see those gaps show up. And if we're not continuing with grade level instruction, we often will miss some other gaps that are there.
All right. Now we're going to move on to questioning round, and I'm going to start with questions from the audience.
I would like to ask a question, and it could be to all 4 of you. It doesn't really depend on your side. What is the definition, before I make any sort of thought about your warrants, what's the definition of pausing instruction? Because, I mean, I was just going to say, the way I see it, it's like you kind of are still pausing to cover stuff, but then, like they said, they're going to have gaps that you miss by pausing instruction in the beginning. So you're going to have to do what they do, and they're going to have to do what you do. And like we said, so
Yes, and you are allowed to agree with each other. It's okay. But who wants to start off? How would you define the pausing? I'll start. Ellen?
What comes to mind when I think of this is the particular situation that we've had at our school prior to you being there, where teachers did not attempt to teach grade level. They said, these kids don't know their multiplication tables. These kids don't know basic math. So I'm starting back there and I am, quote, meeting them where they are. And they did not see any grade level content for at least a semester. So that's what goes in my brain when I say pause.
And that's not at all what I mean by pause. So when I think about pausing, I think about when I start my unit on polynomials, I'm going to go back and do a couple weeks refreshing on quadratics to make sure we still have those skills that we learned in a previous algebra class. That's what, when I was talking about building a skill. So starting with something you know and then building up.
Yeah. Also, sorry. I used to be one of those teachers that would spend the first, 9 weeks reviewing things that they should have learned. And somewhere along the line, I'm like, this is dumb. I'm not teaching them anything new. I just need to go over it as they need it. So.
Yeah, good. Thank you. That was actually a really great first question, because I think defining our terms is a key thing in math and debate. Yes, other questions from the audience?
In thinking about the moment of pause, so we're all in agreement that that's a thing that's going to happen at some point. My wonder right now is if before you're saying, I want to pause and review this thing because it builds up to what I'm learning now, has there been some level of assessment to be do I even need to?
Jason?
So I really think that's where the just-in-time supports comes in instead of the just-in-case supports. So often what I would do in my classroom is at the beginning of a unit, I might give them a question that we haven't covered yet. And that often would show up whether they need those extra steps or those prerequisite skills that lead into that topic. Because at least if I give them that question, they should know the first step or whatever it may be that those prerequisite skills would cover. And they may even know more about the subject, and which makes it easier for me to teach later.
I think that by starting a unit, however, with them being successful, yes, we're going to start talking about quadratic functions. Hey, you learned about linear functions last time. Let's talk about linear functions. And then I can go back and say, remember, this is the same because this is different because these two things, but we're getting there with the same process. So I like the idea of starting with something they know to build into something they don't know.
I think that we're in a really unique time period for mathematics instruction, especially in West Virginia. And I think that that currently, right, we cannot be guaranteed that our kids have had the prior knowledge or the instruction. When I left Philip Barber, for example, I was the only certified math teacher at the high school. I had algebra 2 and above because I was the only certified math teacher. And I had kids in algebra 2 that had not had a certified math teacher since 5th grade. And so had I not stopped before I started, before at the beginning of algebra 2 and every chapter, and just gave them at least a foundation of what they're going to need prerequisite wise, I don't know how I would have been able to continue. And that's going to depend on each of us and our different school situations. But even beyond that, I I bet you there are not many people in here that don't have either an alternate certified person or an uncertified person teaching math in their school or in their district. And again, I know that's not unique to West Virginia, but it definitely is, I think, happening more in West Virginia. And so, as the certified quote unquote expert in the building, they may have been taught the algorithms and they may have those memorized, but do they have the understanding? And again, I'm not in any way trying to shame anybody that's helping us in our classrooms and these long-term subs. Praise the Lord for them, because I don't know what I'd have done without them. But at the same time, I can't expect them to have the same background knowledge that I do, having, taught for 31 years and, went through school for that. So there are things that I definitely feel like need to be filled in beforehand. And also to Jen, to follow up with your question about like, well, how do you even assess that? I want to counter that with, at what point what percentage is it okay to say, okay, we need to pause and go over this? Because there's never going to be a time that everybody in your room is 100%, knowledgeable on the prerequisite skills and is ready to start chapter 3. Like, so like that, I think is going to depend on what classes you teach, what your situation is as far as staffing in your school. But, I think that happens to all of us all the time.
And to your question, I give a pretest at the beginning of every unit, and I can see often through their work on that pretest, when they do work through the pretest, when they show me work, I can see their thinking, and I can see, okay, so this is a big gap that we got to go back and we got to fill in right now. So sometimes it shows up then.
Somebody on the con side, I don't remember who, said, I might have to spend 3 weeks going over last year's stuff before I start the unit on this. How do you get through your standards then when you give up that much time? Because at first I thought we were talking about a day or 3 days, but 3 weeks sounds like a lot of time to devote to somebody else's class and get through your standards, not for the test, but for them to be ready for the next class down the line.
Yeah, can we actually both sides break it down a little bit of like timing and pacing, like how you would do it? Yeah, but I hear from both sides, but yeah, that's it.
I was the person that said I spent a couple weeks on quadratics. And one of the reasons I spent a couple weeks on quadratics is because complex solutions are an algebra 2 skill. And so there is a little bit new that goes into it. So I'm going to review it thoroughly. But also when you're talking about polynomial functions, the quadratics build directly into the polynomial functions. So for me, that probably was not the best example because that's a place I am going to spend longer. If I were introducing a quadratics unit, I would spend a day or two on linear functions.
I'm going to throw the same question to the other side. Just like if you're randomly pausing once in a while to kind of like fill in gaps, do you lose time as well? And how do you make up that time and still get through all of your grade level content?
So I definitely lose time, and as we all know, every group of kids we get are different. So, we have this pacing guide from, whether it's the county or we've developed it on our own, and it's never, you're never there. But you have a kid one year when you do two-step equations, you have a class that, it takes you a week, and then next year it might take you three. So it's just always part of being a teacher is being flexible, I think, and that's where that comes down to.
That was where my thought was, and it comes down to the priority standards. Like we are never going to teach everything. It's just not going to. If we do, I don't think we're doing it justice. If we teach all of our standards, we have grossly left them behind on some of them. There is no way to do them all justice. So we just have to decide what's the most important.
Yeah. Hold on. Before I have one kind of follow up. I'm thinking about some of you mentioned never will we have every student all on the same page and like ready to move on to chapter 3 or whatever, right? So whether you stop and spend a week or 2 or 3 doing review, or whether you spiral it in throughout the year, how do you keep all of those bodies engaged in math if you're reviewing things that some kids don't need, whether it's like all at once in the beginning or whether it's like spread out through the year? How do you keep the students engaged while reviewing who don't need it?
I think that when I plan review ahead of time, I hope that my students trust that I'm going somewhere with it. And I do mean that we are building on what they've already known. Also by reviewing prior knowledge, you are able to scaffold pretty easily. I can make the problems a little harder for some students while I'm going back and teaching a little more fundamental nature to the other students.
I'm a little bit unique in that I have an elementary degree as well. And so what I want to say to you is welcome to elementary school, because I mean, that's what it is in third grade. Like you could have a student that you're not going to need to teach them anything because, they have parents at home that work with them and they're advanced. And so there are techniques that you can do to, help keep them engaged and things like that. But in math, we're kind of spoiled a little bit because if students are in algebra 2, you can almost assume they're all at like a somewhat mathematically, at a level playing field, sort of, but definitely closer than like the average elementary classroom for sure. So yeah, so like that's an area where I feel like elementary teachers would greatly help the secondary teachers in help making that happen.
And that kind of makes me think of like stations. Using stations at the high school level is a good way to do that remediation and enrichment, and just like small tasks, like little warm-ups and things like that. That way, if it is a review, a kid can suck up and do a review for 5 minutes. It's not going to kill him if he already knows how to do it. It's not going to completely kill the class mood for him if he has to sit there and, do something he knows how to do for 5 minutes.
So I can speak kind of to that lower level. I'm a middle school teacher up here with a bunch of high school teachers. So, and it definitely is a whole lot different when I'm teaching a math 8 class, when all of my kids, have to take a math 8 class. It's not like there aren't kids taking, I'm an algebra 2 class. So I think group work is the way I get around that a lot. So when I give a problem, I do random grouping every day in my class. So when I give a problem, hopefully, and most often, they're grouped with kids that, maybe you don't know how to do it, but there's somebody in your group that does. So I don't have to necessarily give that just-in-time support. They get it from the student that's with them in a group.
I kind of have a two-part question. The first one's more of a statement, I guess. Is the debate whether we should pause or how long we should pause? Because it feels like how long we should pause. And my second question is, because as a middle school teacher, most of the skills that my kids are missing are things that they can do on a calculator. So do I stop and teach them multiplication tables, or do I hand them a calculator?
To that second question, thank you. That's been my big point. I have had subs in Algebra 1 classes that have paused to teach them computation. And I'm like, at this point, we got to teach them tools to move on. We can't go back that far. For the second question, I have no response to that one. I don't know. I don't know how long we should pause, because it does sound like it's a how long question.
I can tell you how I deal with the calculator issue in my class, because as 8th graders, they get a calculator on the entire test, so they need to know how to use the calculator. So I definitely don't completely abandon a calculator or ban calculator use in my class. But I do try to have like no calculator days so that they're still, and I'm still finding those kids that, need some work with that. And I'm lucky to have an IB block in my rotation. So that's a time when I can hit those kids like with, let's do some multiplication tables or let's, some of that lower level stuff.
While I think I am pro pausing a little bit longer, I guess that is how we're phrasing it at this point. I don't think it should be paused to teach things like computation and things that you can rely on technology for. Technology is a tool that our kids are always going to have access to. And just because a kid did not learn a skill when they were younger doesn't mean they can't understand higher math if they have the assist from technology. So students in my classes almost universally are allowed to use calculators because, well, sometimes they need to. I don't want that to be a reason that they are held back from being successful in a math class.
How do you think students being aware that they aren't being given grade level content like other students affects their self-efficacy and in turn affects their motivation and success in class?
Well, and that is an argument that can be made, or at least to me, that supports everybody going back and reviewing. Yes, there will be differentiation among things. And yes, there are students that I'm going to give less hard problems to. And not because that's what they need right now. And I hope that students understand that I am trying to help them where they are right now. I don't think I agree with you. I don't think that we should ever single students out in that manner, but we need to support kids where they are. So that becomes it's a balancing act. You're not wrong. I think it's important for everybody to recognize that making progress is a good thing, and progress for you and progress for me may not look exactly the same. So I guess that's my answer. I try to celebrate the progress that they are making, not where we are going from and to, but rather the fact that they have learned math that day and they are getting better right now.
So when I think about, how those students feel if they're not on that grade level or we're not doing grade level content, I really think about how I set up my classroom norms and how my students feel in the classroom. I feel like I hopefully set up a classroom where students aren't afraid of to be wrong or afraid to be at a lower level, and my other students who are at that higher level are not shaming those kids because they're not there. They're helping those kids get to where they need to be.
I kind of follow along with that question. I wanted to ask this anyway. I want you to kind of critique the other team for a moment. I want to know, what do you see as the unintended consequences of the other team's position? So like Sarah and Sissy, you're for like pausing for a couple of days, let's say, to do a longer pause, let's say, right? To do some review and building prior knowledge. What's an unintended consequence of not doing that and just kind of trying to do it as just in time, as you said, right? And same thing, Ellen and Jason, what's the unintended consequence of stopping versus like what you're doing of trying to address it as it comes up in little tiny pieces throughout?
And again, this is not something necessarily against their argument, but I know for me, I worry my instruction would be very disorganized if I paused every time I saw something. I need the structure of going from here to here to here. Now, throwing in a bell ringer every once in a while to reinforce something, I do that also because I think it's a good habit. But in terms of if I am going to intentionally reteach something, because I worry that I see my math as a progression, and if I interrupt that progression, I worry that I'm not going to be able to get back onto that track. I'm not saying that every teacher can't do that. I'm saying that is a limitation on me.
But I think it's important to say too that there are students in your classroom that probably would feel the same way and would get frustrated from the constant stopping. But the other thing that that comes to mind for me is when you're pausing, in the middle of something to teach them a skill that they need, you are only addressing what they need for that specific or specific skill. When I do like a little review at the beginning of the chapter, like I probably cover more material than what they're going to need for individual specific skills. And that, I hope, lends to the understanding of the concepts that are going on throughout the chapter, not just the individual specific computations or skills that you need to get that one thing done.
From my perspective, that longer pause, like Jason had said, you may be addressing something that doesn't need to be addressed. And then I think you lose kids sometimes. If it's something they already know, they check out. And some of those kids that check out may not check back in.
So I'm going to kind of go the opposite way as Sarah, because where Sarah needs to have a hard, rigid schedule, I am super fluid with my, like, I don't have to be super. And I think there are kids, especially middle school kids, that appreciate that because, attention spans are shorter. So when I can switch between 3 different activities in a 40-minute class, those kids are more engaged sometimes. So, and I think that comes back to a lot the level. Like when you go to high school, like especially upper grades, they're able to stick. But I think sometimes my middle school kids appreciate that. We might be working on 2-step equations for half the class, and then we might be doing some multiplication with fractions or whatever. So I think it's beneficial in a middle school class.
Maybe one last question. Does anyone have a burning question they want to throw to our lovely panel here?
Do you believe that when kids understand something, they always understand that thing?
I mean, I'm going to say no because I don't. Oh, and I can remember being in college and listening to a professor and feeling like I've got it, and then going back and looking at it later and not having it. And so that's part of where the revisiting that we're talking about comes into play. I remember when I first started teaching way back in '94 that I was going through Algebra 2 and I was like, why did I find this so hard just 4 years ago? I remember thinking that like in the second time through, things just became a little bit easier, a little bit clearer. I understood a little bit more why. And we don't do that in math. Like we don't ever revisit those skills in any kind of depth. And so, and I think that's important. Like we have kids that go through Algebra 1 successfully, and then they're going into Algebra 2, and I revisit something about linear equations. And these kids that have been super successful are suddenly like, I understand why that's happening now. They thought they understood before, but now they're having a more in-depth, an in-depth understanding. So that's another reason why I think that it's important to go over these things again.
And I find that to be true in my upper level classes as well. These kids that go through and they're very good at school and they're really bright, they're really good at memorizing things. That doesn't mean they understand them. And I also think that a lot of kids benefit from having a second person telling them how to do things, because I don't see math the same way that you see math. And so hearing my words is different than hearing someone else's words. And my words may hit at a different angle, or they may cause a different question or cause a deeper understanding. I think that just because a child has learned something in one grade and mastered a standard does not mean that standard reinforced can't make them understand it better.
I don't know if I can add a whole lot more, because I would have to say that I agree with everything that they said. Because I don't think that question necessarily falls on either side of our debate. Like, if we are good teachers, then we need to understand that kids need to see stuff more than once. And in our everyday lives, we can't remember. If you cook a new recipe, it's not like you can cook it a week from now and do it exactly the same unless but then, like, my grandmother cooked things for so many years, she never needed a recipe book. She knew everything that went in it. But
I do think about a class that I had a couple years ago where it was the levels in that class were crazy. I had sophomores that were in Algebra 2 in that class because they were accelerated. And then I had 2 co-teach kids in the same class period. So it was very, and I tried to vary the instruction. I was trying to give them what they needed because I knew their Algebra 1 background was thin. We'll say thin. I think that's the best word for it. And what wound up happening was some of my upper level kids, one of the upper level, a couple of them also said they were going to. left the class, went to an online class because she quote unquote wasn't being challenged enough. And I didn't, it was a hard balance to build up the skills in those kids just for the SAT. I mean, that was what I focused on that year because I knew these kids are taking that SAT. This is their shot to go to college, and they all wanted to go to college. That's why they were in that class. And it's just a really hard balancing act.
Thank you.
Hi, listeners. Before we get into final arguments, we want to pause and have you ponder for a moment. What did the guest just say? And what stood out for you?
Whatever is on your mind, we want to hear it.
Did you know you could text us your thoughts?
Just head to the show notes for this episode and look for the Text Us link. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
And with that, let's hear our closing statements.
So let me pass it back to the team that is for pausing instruction to some degree, whatever pause means. Sissy and Sarah to talk again about their final closing statement.
I first would like to say that when we chose our assignments, I sat back and let others choose before me, just because I didn't want to take, whatever somebody else wanted, and I was like, oh man, I don't know that I can debate for this side, but then I changed my own mind as I was doing the research and, talking it out in my head. And I think that, Sarah, you said the same thing. And I think that's the beauty of this situation. But then the other thought that I had was, as a math content, we are unique to almost any other content that the kids will take, any other classes in high school, except maybe foreign language. And that is in order for them to be successful in Algebra 2 or pre-calc or, geometry, they have to have mastered or somewhat mastered the skills from the class that come before that. Like no other, if you think about that, no other curriculum in the entire high school is like that. Even English, things are repeated over and over and over and over. But yet in the math class, we expect them to be exposed one time and then be masters of that so that we can move forward with their knowledge. And that is so much pressure as teachers for us to have, especially at a time that, we're suffering from a loss of teachers and a shortage of certified teachers in our buildings. And, the SAT test scores and how we're comparing nationally. And, that is a lot of pressure. And I think that's partly why we're having such a hard time keeping math teachers. Like the amount of work is it is just so hard to be a math teacher and keep up with all of those things. And so I guess my point in saying that is that, that I don't think that other contents realize, what we experience on a day-to-day basis, and how much different their classes are set up. So,
and I would also like to say that, like Sissy, I absolutely wasn't sure which side I fell on. Now I look at my teaching style, and I do believe that I do fall on the side of revisiting prior knowledge before I get started. But that being said, like most things in education, it's not always that simple. We all have different kids. We all have different classes. We all have different years. We all have different preps. We all have different everything. And the answer is not black and white. The answer changes depending on who we are and where we are and when we are. And I think that we all want what's best for our kids, and got to leave it at that.
And then with their final closing arguments on the other side of things, that we should not pause instruction, give it back to Jason and Ellen.
So I find it really interesting that, we planned this whole debate with a question. And, I think when we started this whole thing, we all had a pretty good idea what that question was. And then the first question we get asked totally redefines our debate. So we're down to how long should that pause be? Because we all agree that there is some sort of pause there. So I think we, on our side, think about our pauses as short pauses, but then also our pauses are going to be more frequent. So I'm not sure that the time frame really changes. even though you're going to take a couple weeks to go over something, I'm going to get to that couple weeks. It's just not all going to be at one time.
Yeah, we were talking about just a moment ago, spiraling it in, revisiting it because they do need that frequent practice. Maybe not 2 weeks at a time, maybe today and then a week from now. But I mean, they still do need the practice. Absolutely.
All right, with that, can we give a big round of applause for our brave debaters? I want to thank you, like modeling what it looks like for adults who disagree and have a debate. I think it's really important. And as Jason, you just said, like when people take the time to debate, I do debates a lot of times in education and outside, like the question changes and morphs and we dig into like what do we mean by pause? Is it really just about how long is our pause? Like all those things. And that's where we can really dig in and get into the nuance and the complexity that I talked about earlier today, all that stuff. So thank you all for that. Thank you all for joining us for this debate. And again, I just want to say, like, as we wrap up, Sissy, where can listeners find you and learn more about you?
I work at Harrison County Board of Education, and my email is jecollin@k12.wv.us. I'm also on Facebook. If you just search Sissy Collins, you should find me.
Yeah. Okay, and Sarah, where can listeners find more about you?
I am at Jefferson County Schools in West Virginia at Washington High School, but you can also find me on Instagram at SS McGivern, McGivern.
All right. And Ellen, where can listeners find more about you?
So I am at Summers County High School. You can look at their Facebook page and they can get hold of me. My email is eholt@k12.wv.us, and I am on LinkedIn.
And last but not least, Jason, where can listeners find you?
I'm at Mountain View School in Monroe County, West Virginia. And that's it.
Want to learn more about incorporating debate activities into your math classroom? Go to luzniak.com/podcast to sign up for my mailing list, learn more about debate math, and connect with resources you could use in your classroom today. That's luzniak.com/podcast.
Feel free to reach out to us with comments and questions on debatemath.com, or follow us on social media at debatemath or at debatemathpod on Twitter.
And don't forget that you can text us with your thoughts on any of the debates too.
You can also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts,
or wherever you listen to this podcast. Your feedback is super important to us. Well, that's all from us.
Looking forward to debating with you next episode. Until next time, cheers.